After the powerful and acclaimed Master Dooku decided to depart the Jedi Order, he made plans to rule his homeworld and take up his family name. In canon, he had saved his homeworld of Serenno from a political plot enacted by his own brother, Count Ramil, and in the wake of the destruction brought to his homeworld by members of his own family, Dooku felt compelled that it should be his house to rule, and his house to make right again. Taking back his family title and fortune, Count Dooku would become the ruling figurehead of this Outer Rim world. Of course, he was only able to do this as the last living male heir to his family's fortune, as his father had long since passed away. But had his father still been alive, things would have been extremely difficult for Dooku, considering how much his father hated Jedi and anyone who had the ability to touch the Force. We learn in the novel Dooku Jedi Lost that his family despised the Jedi so much that when Dooku showed signs of Force sensitivity, his father attempted to kill him. So why was it that the Counts of Serenno hated the Jedi Order so much as to try to leave one of their own for dead? Well, the answer may not be what you expect. So today, my friends, let's open up a holocron, explore Dooku's heritage, and learn why this noble house hates the Force and anyone who can wield it. Before we begin though, we have received a terrible vision through the Force. Many who use our archives have not yet subscribed to our order, so if you've been enjoying the daily Star Wars knowledge, reach out and crush that subscribe button. It is your destiny, we have foreseen it. Our story begins with an individual by the name of Count Gora, Dooku's father. Gora had married Anya and had 3 children. 2 boys, Ramil and Dooku, and a daughter by the name of Genza. While Dooku was barely an infant, he was so powerful in the Force that he began showing signs early. This is highly atypical, as usually it's the Jedi mystics who can ascertain through the Force where the next Force sensitive will be born. But in rare cases, as with Dooku, some infants will begin showing signs as early as a few months old, and their parents will get in contact with the Jedi. Interestingly though, this is exactly what Count Gora did, but he only did it to get rid of his son. He was frightened and disgusted by his son's aptitude for the Force and for power. He called him a freak and refused to raise him as his own, fearing how the rest of the noble houses of Serenno and the common people would think of their family. However, after contacting the Jedi, Count Gora didn't even so much as wait for them to arrive. He instead left his infant son outside near the edge of a dangerous forest, without clothes or without any identification. This forest was perilous, as it housed various dangerous predators, the most prolific known as the Spin Wolves. Luckily though, the young Dooku was found in time by the Jedi Seekers, who managed to rescue him and bring him back to the temple, never telling him what his father almost did to him. Years later, Dooku would learn that his father had an extremely strong distrust of the Republic and the Jedi in large, mainly due to the fact of their family's long history. Count Gora's ancestors had actually led the people of Serenno to freedom against the Sith back in the old days of the Republic, and they had won their freedom from the Sith without the aid of the Jedi. Gora's ancestors decided that Serenno should remain independent, and they were heavily distrustful of the Republic's corruption and greed, being of the mind that the Jedi were barely more than lapdogs of the Senate. But for Gora, it went even further. He not only hated the Jedi for these political reasons, but likely hated anyone who used the Force because of the Sith. Those Dark Lords who would use their power to subjugate his people and his ancestors. They were no good, and to him, the Jedi were no different. In Gora's eyes, just like how the Sith used their power to enforce the rule of their empire, so did the Jedi to do the same but on behalf of the Republic. And with how the tensions between the Inner Rim and the Outer Rim were beginning to heat up, this was all the more reason for Gora to distance his family from anything that had to do with the Force, especially since he was preaching a strong message of isolation for Serenno as its leading count at the time. But what's compelling about this though, is that Count Gora would not completely cut all ties to the Senate. As Dooku was a youngling, Gora would be convinced that the Serenian Council should invite the Republic representatives and even the Jedi to the planet for a festival. The festival in question was not exactly one of good faith, but a way to invite traders and merchants from all around the Outer Rim in order to show the Senate all of the potential that the Outer Rim had to offer. Even though they wanted to keep their independence, it was a money-making move, and was fiscally wise to at least maintain some trade with the larger Republic so that their planet could remain wealthy, and the Outer Rim would not starve to death. You see, it was around the ending of the High Republic era that the Core and Inner Rim were starting to act as their own caste, taking advantage of the fact that they were closer to Coruscant, and were primarily closer to the heart and power of the Republic. Those who lived closer to Coruscant had always had more sway in the Senate, and were starting to receive special treatment that the Outer Rim worlds did not get. With this sort of game going on, the Outer Rim was having to work harder to have their voices heard in the Senate, and this is what the festival aimed to correct. However, disaster would strike when an unexpected earthquake interrupted the festival, and it was revealed that one of the younglings that Yoda had brought to Serenno was Gora's estranged son, Dooku. Unfortunately, by now, it was too late, and Dooku had finally met his true family again, garnering a close relationship with his sister Genza, and even saving them both from pirates during his visit to Serenno. Yoda believed that this was dangerous, as Dooku was a prodigy, and him forming an attachment to his original family could prove to be disastrous. In contrast to the rest of her family, Countess Genza had no problem with the Jedi or Dooku despite her father's doctrine of hatred. Dooku and his long-lost sister would become very close friends, as well as maintaining a secret line of communication whenever Dooku went back to the Jedi Temple. Their connection would come in handy in the best way possible later in life, as Count Ramil would stage a big political coup against the Republic, Dooku's own brother. By secretly hiring mercenaries and raiders, Ramil would attack his own home world in an attempt to seize power. He had cut off all communication outside of Serenno so that no one could call the Republic for aid, all except the secret connection that Genza had with Jedi Master Dooku. Sending a distress message pleading for help, Dooku had attempted to convince the Council to send himself and a strike team of Jedi, asking the Republic to formally help and back his home. Although it was considered, it was ultimately denied on the grounds that Serenno had always stated that they did not want the Senate's help, and they intended to stay completely independent. The Jedi would not help this planet unless Serenno agreed to officially join the Republic. Righteously infuriated, Dooku decided to go all alone, and in about a week or so, turned the entire war around single-handedly. This would be when Dooku would take upon himself his family's name yet again at the behest of his sister, and would decide to officially depart the Jedi Order for good, never returning to the Grand Temple as a Jedi ever again. It is extremely ironic that Count Gora's entire hatred for the Jedi came down to the actions committed by the Sith, and yet, through his cruel efforts, a Jedi turned Sith Lord would be the one that ultimately sat on the throne of the world, a man coming from his own house. We don't really very often explore stories about individuals that lump the Jedi and Sith together in a single category of being freaks with abilities, but Count Gora's disdain for the Force goes farther than many of the others that we have seen, going so far as to attempt to kill his own son, leaving him for dead, and inspiring his other heir to assault his own home for the sake of power. Luckily though, it was for Countess Genza who had the sense to ask her brother for help. But anyway, my friends, what do you think of Dooku's family and family history? Let us know in the comments down below your thoughts on Dooku's father, brother, and sister. And as always, my friends, thank you for passing by our archives today, and have a fantastic one.